The Treasurer Josh Frydenberg joins me now live from Canberra. Thanks for your time, Treasurer.
Nice to be with you, Leigh.
Is it a fair reading of these numbers to say that the most pain for Australian workers and families is yet to come?
Well, we're actually starting to see some positive signs across the Australian economy. That's obviously outside of Victoria, and that has played out in the recent ABS data for the month of June, which showed that 210,000 jobs were created. That was double what the market was expecting. 60% of those jobs were women and 50% were young people. But we're under no illusions, Leigh. If you look at the situation in Victoria, that makes up a quarter of the national economy. My fellow Victorians, more than 5 million of them, are in lockdown. So what it does show is a very painful reminder that the effectiveness of our health response will determine both the speed and the trajectory of our economic recovery.
These forecasts come with extreme domestic and global uncertainty. Victoria, as you point out, illustrates that. These numbers, as bad as they are, most likely represent the best case scenario, don't they?
Well, they do, based on the situation obviously currently in Victoria and that 6-week lockdown ending, but the restrictions still being in place till the end of December in various forms. And then outside of Victoria, it's based on the easing of the restrictions as agreed by the Premiers and Chief Ministers and Prime Minister at National Cabinet back on the 8th of May. But you're right, these are very, very uncertain times. And if you wind the clock back just 1 month to this very day, Australia had 20 new cases, and today we've had more than 20 times that number just in Victoria alone. And I think that's a very stark reminder of the uncertainty that we face in modelling and forecasting the economic future.
Well, on those forecasts, the government wants the economy to grow at around 3.75% for the next 5 years. That's above trend. How is that not overly optimistic for an economy in the midst of a pandemic and one that hasn't seen major productivity reform in a couple of decades?
Well, we're obviously very determined to continue to create the jobs that we had done pre-COVID, and the Prime Minister and his various ministers and myself have outlined our priorities for reform. And just the other week...
But that's my question, aren't you being overly optimistic? We're not pre-COVID.
Well, we're being very determined in what is a very uncertain environment. And so the roadmap forward, the Job Maker plan, involves a couple of $1 billion in skills, underwriting with a wage subsidy, 180,000 apprentices, creating 340,000 new positions for training and reskilling, bringing forward $4 billion worth of infrastructure spending, cutting red tape so businesses spend less time filling in forms and more time growing their business. And of course, tax reform continues to be a priority, and maintaining the flexible workplaces that we were able to achieve with the JobKeeper reforms.
On tax reform question, is the government planning to go ahead with the second phase of its income tax cuts due in 2022?
Look, we'll make decisions about that legislated timetable in the context of our budget, which will be handed down on October the 6th. But I do point out to you...
Sorry to interrupt. So there'll be a decision about those income tax cuts in that budget?
Well, look, we're obviously constantly looking at our options, but when it comes to that tax timetable, it was set out very clearly to the Australian people, and that was endorsed by the Australian people. We successfully legislated it after the election, and what it will see is a major reform to the tax system where 94% of taxpayers will pay a marginal rate of no more than 30 cents in the dollar.
But so Treasurer, on that point, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
You're not really sorry, but that's okay.
I'm not actually. If things have changed since you took that policy to the election drastically, if you go ahead with income tax cuts, they favour the wealthy just because they earn more money, the people currently least likely to need help, and you're foregoing income to the government at a time where you need to spend more and you need to target that spending very carefully at the sectors of the economy that have been most disadvantaged, not spread the money all around like income tax cuts do.
Well, our progressive tax system is actually maintained with that tax reform that we've put in place. And what we have ensured, and already stage 1 has been implemented, and Australians who earn between $48,000 and $90,000 are getting the full benefit of those tax cuts with $1,080 in their pockets.
But you're not addressing my point that income tax cuts are a pretty blunt instrument. What you need in the wake of the pandemic is very targeted spending to specific sectors.
Well, we're not we're not talking about just one particular measure. We're talking about a whole suite, a comprehensive range of economic measures that we're putting in place. Now, when it comes to tax cuts, obviously what they do is put more money into people's pockets, so that boosts aggregate demand, and boosting aggregate demand at a time when consumption, which is 60% of GDP, has fallen quite substantially, is actually a good thing for the economy. Now, of course, the JobKeeper program, which we announced the 6-month extension to just a few days ago, together with the cash flow boost, which is putting money into businesses' pockets based on the size of their payroll, together with our payment to households, and particularly those on income support, including millions of pensioners. All of those things are designed to keep people in jobs and businesses in business, and those policies are actually being quite effective.
The Victorian Premier yesterday pointed to job insecurity and the casualisation of the workforce as reasons why people can't afford to take time off work to isolate if they have corona symptoms. Do you agree that that's a driver of those low rates of self-isolation in Victoria?
Well, I don't think anyone's got an excuse to not be following the medical advice. I mean, what we're talking about here is life and death issues.
But is the casualisation of the workforce and the fact that people don't get paid leave, a lot of people, one of the reasons?
That is not what is driving people's disobedience in relation to some of the restrictions.
What do you think is driving it?
Well, I think Victorians, the ones that I've been seeing, are actually following the medical advice, and I think
the
Victorians
Premier said half the people being tested aren't even isolating after they're being tested. So what's driving that? Frustration or?
Yeah, I'll leave those observations to the Premier. What I would say to you is that Victorians are absolutely focused on suppressing this rise in number of cases and getting out of lockdown as fast as possible based on the medical advice. Now, there are some people, quite clearly, who are not following those instructions, and those people should be dealt with accordingly.
Treasurer, thanks for your time today.
Good to be with you.
Hi, I'm Leigh Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.